Hello and welcome to Beginning Latin 4. We are going to use our book today, Latin for Children, Primer B, and we will begin with the Our Father in Latin. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Pater noster, qui es in caeli, sanctificetur nomen tuum. Adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Today we're going to look at chapter 20. So as I share my board, please turn to page 161. All right. So chapter 20 is an introduction to third declension, I-stem noun endings. So we studied the third declension noun endings in our last chapter. And now in chapter 20, we're going to look at a particular kind of I-stem noun. And I'm going to write out the 10 different form endings on the board. Of course, there's nominative, singular, genitive, singular, dative, singular, accusative, singular, and ablative. Singular, and then, of course, there are the plural forms. And so we'll make a heading for singular and plural. And when you see that letter X on your page, that X in the nominative singular means there are more than one ending for nominative singular. Is, E for dative, M for accusative, and A for ablative. And now we'll go to the plural column. For nominative plural, it's eis, ium, ibus, eis, ibus. And as a part of your homework assignment, you're going to be listening to a Latin tutorial recording on YouTube that I think will be helpful in a little deeper explanation of third declension in general, and then I-stem in particular. Okay, the new vocabulary words are a mixture of third declension and third declension I-stems. So we have on page 161, we have frater, fratris is masculine, meaning brother, mater, matris, feminine, of course, meaning mother, pater, patris, masculine for father. Civis, civis is a consonantal I-stem, citizen. Parens, parentis, again, a consonantal I-stem, parent. Navis, navis, feminine I-stem, ship. Juvenis, juvenis, consonantal I-stem for young person, juvenis. The ecclesial spelling is with a J, although there is no pronunciation difference. And it means a young person about the ages from 20 to 40. Senex, senis is masculine, old man, urbs, urbis, feminine I-stem, walled, town, or city. It's where we get our word, our derivative urban. Gens, gentis is a clan or a tribe, and that's feminine I-stem. And we'll get into the grammar lesson and show some of the contrast, some of the third declension nouns. Your review vocabulary: dea, dea, feminine for goddess; templum, templi, neuter for temple; epistula, epistulae, feminine for letter; fama, fame, feminine for fame, rumor, or report; and familia, familiae, feminine for your family. All right, then part of your homework assignment is the chapter story. We won't do that in class. Now I'll share my screen again. And if you turn to page 164, there's a nice write-up on third declension I stem nouns. This week, some of the words in addition to the abbreviation for the gender have an I in the parentheses. So if you see that I in the parentheses, it's called an I stem third declension noun or word. In general, the I stem words have an extra I, as you can see in some of the forms between the ending and the rest of the stem. And so, for example, let's take a look. We've got an I here, right? Between the ending and the rest of the stem. We've got an I here, right? And then we've got another I here between the ending and the rest of the stem. And then this one is, the dative form is independently an I genitive. We've got an I here before the S. Most of the I stem words just have one little difference from regular third declension words. And this week's chant highlights the difference. The difference is if you compare the regular third declension with the third declension I stem, you'll notice the only big difference is the extra I in the genitive plural, which is right here. There's an extra I in the genitive plural. Here are the 3 rules for identifying I stems. I stem nouns, masculine and feminine nouns whose nominative singular ends in ES or IS, and whose nominative and genitive forms are parasyllabic, which means they have the same number of syllables, are I stem nouns. So one example of that is the word finis, finis, finis. And as you can see, there are 2 syllables in that word, and that is not in this new vocabulary assignment. Number 2, masculine and feminine nouns whose nominative singular ends in X or S and whose stem ends in a double consonant. And there's an example given in your book, which would be herbs, urbis. All right, the masculine and feminine nouns whose singular nominative ends in an X or an S. So you see the S in herbs, and then whose stem ends in a double consonant, like RB. And again, well, that one actually is in your chapter new vocab, and it's a walled town or city. Okay, and then we're going to take a look at, let me just write this in, a limit or boundary is finis, and walled town or city is an urbis. Okay, and then we're going to take a look at the 3rd rule, which is that neuter nouns whose nominative singular ends in AL, AR, or E, for example, mare, maris, are also I stem nouns. And you're going to learn about neuter I stem nouns in chapter 30, the last chapter of the book before the review chapter. Of course, mare maris means see. Okay. So adjectives and agreement. We're going to move on to the bottom of page 164. And 164 are the adjectives and agreement. You recall adjectives are words that modify or describe nouns. Hopefully you remember in Latin, an adjective has to agree in number, I should say first case, number, and gender with the noun that it's modifying. This doesn't mean that it must agree with noun in endings. So remember we said, like, for example, poeta, nauta, and agricola are first declension feminine noun endings, but they're not feminine words. They're actually masculine words. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to agree with the noun in the endings. It may or may not. How can an adjective agree with a noun in case, number, and gender without having the same endings? The answer is that the noun and adjective can belong to different declensions. So all nouns are in a family, but they may not be in the same family as the adjective that you're using to describe the noun. So that's the tricky part. You have to kind of stay on your toes when you see that. So first of all, right now, you know that all the adjectives you've studied have belonged to what's called first and second declension group of adjectives. These adjectives get their feminine forms from the first declension and their masculine and neuter forms from the second declension. As long as all the adjectives you've learned were first and second declension adjectives, and all of the nouns were either first or second declension nouns, then it was pretty easy. With very few exceptions, the noun would agree with the adjective, like bonus, filius bonus, or deus magnus, with few exceptions. Now that you've started learning third declension nouns, it's not going to be so easy. So if you would take a look at figure 21 on the next page, take a look at page 165. I'll erase the board so that we'll have a little room to recreate that chart there. All right, on 165, you notice that while the endings aren't the same in each phrase, the noun and the adjective agree in case, number, and gender. So for example, if you want to say a great ship, navis magna, it's a great ship, but navis and magna don't have the same endings because they belong to different declensions, different families. In the genitive, it would be navis magnae. Magnae of the great ship. In the dative, navi magnae. In the accusative, navem magnam. And in the ablative, nave magna, and etc. And you can take a look at the plural forms too. None of the plural forms have the same ending, but they do agree in case, number, and gender. Okay, so for this week's homework, which I've included, of course, in your email home, is to do the memory worksheet, and you're going to translate your new vocabulary. Then do the chant for the third declension masculine and feminine I stem nouns. And remember to label the boxes as well. Then there's just a few questions in the grammar section. There's a translation worksheet on page 167. The activity worksheet is a good extra practice if you have time. And then there's a 2-page quiz. I've also given you a couple of links. One of the links is to Cicero's quotes, his famous quotes. And one of my favorite writings by Cicero was on friendship. And he basically says that without friendship, life isn't even really worth living. So friendship is really important. That's a great piece if you can Google that. But the link I sent you on Cicero was his famous, I think, either top 10 or top 25 quotes. And they're really amazing quotations from him. They have a lot of truth in them. The other link is to a Latin tutorial on YouTube about third declension I stems. Third declension is very, it doesn't follow the pattern as easily as the other declensions. And it's a little sloppy, you know, language is sloppy. It's not, it's not all tied up neatly in a bow. So don't worry when you watch the YouTube video from Latin tutorial. It's well done. Just watch it a few times. It'll sink in as we practice those I stem nouns. And we'll see you in class. God bless.